Part 1. The Hook. Imagine the year 1200 AD. A glorious time of chivalry, majestic castles, and romance. Also, a time of cholera, zero dental hygiene, and a life expectancy of about 35 minutes. In this chaotic world of mud and sharp metal, meet Sir Cedric of Snottingham. To the average peasant, Cedric looks like the ultimate alpha male. He stands tall, his armor shines like the sun, and his sword is so polished you can see the sheer panic reflected in his eyes. Because, you see, Sir Cedric has a tiny, microscopic, country-sized secret. He is a massive, unapologetic coward. Yes, while other knights dream of glorious battle and dying for the realm, Cedric's primary goal in life is to avoid getting a paper cut. He hates the sound of clashing swords. It hurts his sensitive ears. He hates the sight of blood. It ruins the aesthetic of his custom-made lavender-scented tunic. And he absolutely detests horses, which he describes as giant, unpredictable lawnmowers with a personal vendetta against my spine. In a society where masculinity is measured by how many Frenchmen you can poke with a stick, Cedric is currently hiding in a cupboard because he saw a particularly aggressive goose outside. How did a man who gets startled by his own shadow end up wearing 50 pounds of steel? Let us find out. Part 2. The Backstory. To understand Cedric's predicament, we have to look at how medieval society worked. In 1200 AD, Europe was run by feudalism. At the top was the king, then the nobles, then the knights, and at the very bottom, the peasants, whose primary job was to work 18 hours a day and die of the common cold. Now, Cedric was the third son of a minor baron. In medieval Europe, primogeniture meant the eldest son got all the land, the second son went to the church to pray for the family's sins, and the third son, well, he got sent to night school. Night school was not like modern school. There were no math tests, only how to stab a guy from a galloping horse tests. Cedric hated every second of it. During his training as a page and a squire, he perfected the ancient and noble art of tactical hiding. When it was time for sword practice, Cedric suddenly developed severe medieval gluten intolerance. When it was time for jousting, he would grease his own saddle so he would fall off immediately, claiming the wooden lance was spiritually offensive. Despite his complete lack of martial skill, his father paid a massive sum of money to buy him a knighthood anyway, mostly to get him out of the castle. Thus, Sir Cedric was dubbed. He was given a suit of armor, a sword, and a shield with his family crest, which Cedric secretly altered from a roaring lion to a running rabbit, claiming it represented agile strategy. For 5 glorious years, Cedric managed to avoid all military action by bribing messengers, pretending to have the gout, and writing highly detailed letters to the king explaining that he was currently on a spiritual pilgrimage to find a very specific holy turnip. But his luck was about to run out. Part 3. The Problem. It is now 1200 AD, and King John of England, historically known as King John Lackland because he was terrible at keeping land, is having a massive temper tantrum. He has managed to anger the Pope, annoy his barons, and lose a massive chunk of territory to the King of France. King John needs an army, and he needs it yesterday. Under feudal law, every knight owed the king 40 days of military service a year. If they did not want to fight, they had to pay a tax called scutage, or shield money. Normally, Cedric would gladly pay the scutage. He would sell his own grandmother to avoid a sword fight. But there was a problem. Cedric had recently spent his entire life savings on a state-of-the-art, luxury feather mattress imported from Constantinople, because a knight cannot defend the realm with a stiff neck. He was completely, utterly broke. When the royal summons arrived at Snottingham Manor, delivered by a very sweaty messenger, Cedric realized he had 2 choices. Option A. Pay the tax he did not have and get thrown into a medieval debtor's prison, which was basically a damp hole filled with rats and plague. Option B. Pack his bags, put on his heavy metal suit, and march to the siege of Castle Grimstone to face Baron von Bloodtooth, a man who allegedly ate raw beef and used enemy skulls as cereal bowls. For Cedric, this was a choice between dying slowly in a hole or dying quickly on a battlefield. He chose to try and cheat his way out of both. Part 4. The Attempts to Solve. Cedric's survival instincts kicked into overdrive. He needed a plan, and fast. His first attempt was the classic faking sick. He called for the local medieval doctor, a man who wore a bird mask and believed all illnesses were caused by bad air and an imbalance of bodily humors. Cedric claimed he had contracted a rare, highly contagious disease called the Saxonian shakes. He shivered violently, painted fake red spots on his face using berry juice, and groaned dramatically. Unfortunately, medieval medicine was terrifying. The doctor took one look at him and said, "Ah, yes. Excess blood in the head. We must immediately apply 30 leeches to your eyelids and drill a small hole in your skull to let the demons out." Cedric looked at the rusty drill, looked at the squirming leeches, and immediately cured himself. "It is a miracle," Cedric yelled, leaping out of bed. "The power of prayer has healed me. No leeches required." Plan 1 was a painful failure. His second attempt involved his overenthusiastic, 12-year-old squire, Barnaby. Barnaby was obsessed with the chivalric code, a code of conduct that knights were supposed to follow, which mostly involved being brave, protecting the weak, and never, ever running away. Cedric called Barnaby into his quarters. "Barnaby, my boy," Cedric said, putting a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "I have had a vision from the saints. They told me that you, and only you, must wear my armor and lead our forces into battle. It is your path to glory." Barnaby's eyes welled with tears of joy. "Oh, Sir Cedric, that is the most noble thing ever. I will tell the king immediately of your extreme generosity." 10 minutes later, the king's herald arrived. Apparently, the chivalric code had a strict rule against sending children to fight in adult armor. Cedric was fined 5 gold pieces for attempted child substitution and ordered to the front lines immediately, or face execution for treason. Plan 2, catastrophic failure. Desperate, Cedric tried Plan 3, the scenic route. On the march to Castle Grimstone, Cedric volunteered to lead the vanguard through the Whispering Woods, a forest notorious for being incredibly easy to get lost in. His plan was simple: get lost, wander around in circles for 3 weeks eating wild berries, and arrive at the castle just in time to help clean up after the battle was safely over. He deliberately ignored his map and led his small contingent of men left, then left again, then into a swamp. He was triumphant. They were completely lost. But then, destiny played a cruel joke. It turned out the French army had also tried to take a shortcut. As Cedric emerged from the swamp, covered in mud and complaining about his wet socks, he walked directly into the enemy's rear supply camp. The French cooks and camp followers, terrified by the sudden appearance of a muddy, screaming English knight, panicked and fled, leaving behind all their supplies. Cedric's men cheered. "Sir Cedric has executed a brilliant flank attack," they shouted. Cedric wanted to cry. He had accidentally become a military genius. Part 5, the unexpected twist. Now, there was no escaping it. Because of his brilliant flank attack, King John placed Sir Cedric at the absolute front of the battle line for the final assault on Castle Grimstone. The day of the battle arrived. The sky was dark, the rain was pouring, and the mud was ankle-deep. Opposite them stood the terrifying forces of Baron von Bloodtooth. The Baron himself was mounted on a horse the size of a small house, holding an axe that looked heavy enough to crush a peasant just by existing. Cedric was at the very front, his knees knocking together so violently that the metal plates of his armor sounded like a percussion band. He was actively praying for a localized meteor strike to end his misery. The war horns blew. The charge began. Thousands of men screamed and ran forward. Cedric, completely paralyzed by fear, tried to pull his horse's reins to turn around and run away. But his horse, a stubborn beast named Barnaby Jr., had other plans. In his panic, Cedric accidentally dropped his sword. In trying to catch it, he leaned forward and violently kicked his spurs into the horse's sides. Barnaby Jr. did not turn around. Instead, startled by the spurs, the horse bolted forward at Mach speed, directly toward the enemy lines. To make matters worse, Cedric's helmet slid down, completely covering his eyes. He was now riding blind, at full speed, directly toward Baron von Bloodtooth, with no weapon. Terrified and unable to see, Cedric began to scream a high-pitched, blood-curdling shriek of pure, unadulterated terror. He began waving his arms wildly in the air, trying to find his reins, looking to the enemy like a crazed, weaponless berserker performing some kind of forbidden, ancient pagan war dance. Baron von Bloodtooth watched this terrifying spectacle. He saw a knight riding at him at suicidal speed, blind, screaming like a banshee, waving his bare hands in complete defiance of all military logic, and completely ignoring the arrows flying around him. The Baron had spent his entire life fighting rational men who feared death. He had never fought a man who appeared to be actively seeking a brutal ending with such manic enthusiasm. "He is a demon," the Baron whispered. "A mud-covered, screaming demon." Just as Cedric's horse was about to crash directly into the Baron's horse panicked, reared up, and threw the massive warlord into the deep mud. Cedric's horse leaped right over him. The enemy soldiers, seeing their invincible leader defeated by a screaming, blind, weaponless madman, lost all resolve. They threw down their weapons and fled in absolute terror. The siege was won. Part 6. The Resolution. When Cedric finally managed to push his helmet up, the battlefield was quiet. The enemy had retreated, and his own army was staring at him in absolute, reverent silence. King John himself rode up, tears of joy in his eyes. "Sir Cedric of Snottingham," the king declared, "you rode into battle without a sword, blindfolded, screaming the war cry of the old gods, and defeated the Baron with your bare hands. You are the bravest, most insane knight in all of Christendom." Cedric, still trembling and trying to check if he had soiled his armor, simply nodded and squeaked, "Yes, sire. It was all part of the plan." Cedric was awarded the Grand Order of the Golden Rabbit, a title the king invented on the spot, along with a massive estate and enough gold to buy 10,000 luxury mattresses. He was also permanently excused from all future military service, as the king declared his genius brain was too valuable to risk on the battlefield. And so, Sir Cedric of Snottingham lived a long, comfortable, and incredibly cowardly life, proving that in the weird and wacky world of medieval Europe, sometimes absolute, pants-wetting terror looks exactly like legendary heroism. Just remember, if you ever find yourself facing a giant, axe-wielding warlord, don't fight. Just put on a loose helmet, scream like a goat, and let your horse do the rest.